Chapter 2, Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. Are we not lucky that plants reproduce sexually? The mites of flower that we enjoy gazing at, the scents and the perfumes that we swoon over, the rich colors that attract us are all there as an aid to sexual reproduction. Flowers do not exist only for us to be used for our own selfishness. All flowering plants show sexual reproduction. A look at the diversity of structures of the inflorescence, flowers, and floral parts shows an amazing range of adaptation to ensure formation of the end products of sexual reproduction, the flowers and the seeds. In this chapter, let us understand the morphology, structure, and the processes of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, angiosperms. 2.1 Flower, a fascinating organ of angiosperms. Human beings have had an intimate relationship with flowers since time immemorial. Flowers are objects of aesthetic, ornamental, social, religious, and cultural values. They have always been used as a symbols for conveying important human feelings such as love, affection, happiness, grief, mourning, etc. List at least 5 flowers of ornamental value that are commonly cultivated at homes and in gardens. Find out the name of 5 more flowers that are used in social and cultural celebration in your family. Have you heard of floriculture? What does it refers to? To a biologist, flowers are morphological and embryological marvels and the site of sexual reproduction. In class 11th, you have read the various parts of a flower. Figure 2.1 will help you to recall the parts of a typical flower. Can you name the two parts in a flower in which the two most important units of sexual reproduction develop? 2.2 Pre-fertilization, structures and events. Much before the actual flower is seen on a plant, the decision that the plant is going to flower has taken place. Several hormonal and structural changes are initiated which lead to the differentiation and further development of the floral primordium. Inflorescences are formed which bear the floral buds and then the flower. In a flower, the male and the female reproductive structures, the androecium and the gynoecium differentiate and develop. You would recollect that the androecium consists of a whorl of stamens representing the male reproductive organ and the gynoecium represents the female reproductive organ. 2.2.1 Stamens, microsporangium and pollen grain. Figure 2.2a shows the two parts of a typical stamen, the long and slender stalk called the filament and the terminal generally bilobed structure called the anther. The proximal end of the filament is attached to the thalamus or the petal of a flower. The number and length of stamen are variable in flower of different species. If you were to collect a stamen each from 10 flowers, each from different species and arrange them on a slide, you would be able to appreciate the large variations seen in nature. Careful observation of each stamen under a dissecting microscope and making neat diagrams would elucidate the range in shape and attachment of anther in different flowers. A typical angiosperm anther is bilobed, with each lobe having two theca, that is, they are dithecous. Figure 2.2b. Often a longitudinal groove runs lengthwise, separating the theca. Let us understand the various types of tissues and their organization in a transverse section of an anther. Figure 2.3b. The bilobed nature of an anther is very distinct in the transverse section of the anther. The anther is a four-sided tetragonal structure consisting of four microsporangia located at the corners, two in each lobe. The microsporangia develops further and become pollen sac. They extend longitudinally all through the length of an anther and are packed with pollen grains. Structure of microsporangium. In a transverse section, a typical microsporangium appears nearly circular in outline. It is generally surrounded by four wall layers. Figure 2.3b. The epidermis, endothecium, middle layer and the tapetum. The outer three wall layers perform the function of protection and help in dehiscence of anther to release the pollen. The innermost wall layer is the tapetum. It nourishes the developing pollen grains. Cells of the tapetum possess dense cytoplasm and generally have more than one nucleus. Can you think of how tapetal cells would become binucleate? When the anther is young, a group of compactly arranged homogeneous cells called the sporogenous tissues occupy the center of each microsporangium. Microsporogenesis. As the anther develops, the cells of the sporogenous tissue undergo meiotic division to form microspore tetrads. What would be the ploidy of the cells of the tetrad? As each cell of the sporogenous tissue is capable of giving rise to a microspore tetrad, each one is a potential pollen or microspore mother cell. The process of formation of microspore from microspore mother cell PMC through meiosis is called microsporogenesis. The microspores as they are formed are arranged in a cluster of four cells, the microspore tetrad, figure 2.3a. As the anther mature and dehydrate, the microspores dissociate from each other and develop into pollen grains. Figure 2.3b. Inside each microsporangium, several thousands of microspores or pollen grains are formed that are released with the dehiscence of anther. Figure 2.3c. Pollen grains. The pollen grains represent the male gametophytes. If you touch the open anther of hibiscus or any other flower, you would find deposition of yellowish powdery pollen grains on your fingers. Sprinkle these grains on a drop of water taken on a glass slide and observe under a microscope. You will really be amazed at the variety of architecture, sizes, shapes, colors, designs seen on a pollen grains from different species. Figure 2.4. Pollen grains are generally spherical, measuring about 25 to 50 micrometer in diameter. It has a prominent three it has a prominent two-layered wall. The hard outer layer, called the exine, is made up of sporopollenin, which is one of the most resistant organic material known. It can withstand high temperatures and strong acids and alkali. No enzyme that degrades sporopollenin is so far known. Pollen grain exine has prominent apertures called germ pores, where sporopollenin is absent. Pollen grains are well preserved as fossil because of the presence of sporopollenin. The exine exhibit a fascinating array of pattern and designs. Why do you think the exine should be hard? What is the function of germ pore? The inner wall of the pollen grain is called the entine. It is a thin and continuous layer made up of cellulose and pectin. The cellulose of pollen grain is surrounded by a plasma membrane. When the pollen grain is mature, it contains two cells, the vegetative cell and the generative cell. Figure 2.5b. The vegetative cell is bigger, has abundant food reserve and a large irregularly shaped nucleus. The generative cell is small and floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell. It is spindle shaped with dense cytoplasm and a nucleus. In over 60% of angiosperms, pollen grains are shed at this two-cell stage. In the remaining species, the generative cell divides mitotically to give rise to two male gametes before pollen grains are shed. Three-cell stage. Pollen grains of many species cause severe allergies and bronchial affections in some people, often leading to chronic respiratory disorders, asthma, bronchitis, etc. It may be mentioned that Parthenium or carrot grass that came to India as a contaminant with imported wheat has become ubiquitous in occurrence and cause pollen allergy. Pollen grains are rich in nutrients. It has become fashion in recent years to use pollen tablets as food supplements. In Western countries, a large number of pollen products in the form of tablets and syrups are available in the market. Pollen consumption has been claimed to increase the performance of athletes and racehorses. Figure 2.6. When once they are shed, pollen grains have to land on the stigma before they lose viability if they have to bring about fertilization. How long do you think the pollen grains retain viability? The period for which pollen grains remain viable is highly variable and to some extent depends on the prevailing temperature and humidity. In some cereals, such as rice and wheat, pollen grains lose viability within 30 minutes of their release, and in some members of Rosaceae, Leguminosae, and Solanaceae, they maintain viability for months. You may have heard of storing semen, sperms of many animals, including humans, for artificial insemination. It is possible to store pollen grains of large number of species for years in liquid nitrogen, minus 196 degrees Celsius. Such stored pollen can be used as pollen banks, similar to the seed bank in a crop breeding programs. 2.2.2 The pistil, megasporangium, ovule and embryo sac. The gynoecium represent the female reproductive part of a flower. The gynoecium may consist of a single pistil, monocarpellary, or may have more than one pistil, multicarpellary. When they when there are more than one, the pistils may be fused together, syncarpus, figure 2.7b, or may be free, apocarpus, figure 2.7c. Each pistil has three parts, figure 2.7a, the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma serve as a landing platform for pollen grains. The style is a long, elongated, cylinder part beneath the stigma. The basal bulged part of the pistil is the ovary. Inside the ovary is the ovarian cavity, locules. The placenta is located inside the ovarian cavity. Recall the definition and types of placentations that you studied in Class 11th. Arising from the placenta are the megasporangia, commonly called ovules. The number of ovule in an ovary may be 1, wheat, paddy, mango, to many, papaya, watermelon, orchids. The megasporangium ovule. Let us familiarize ourselves with the structure of a typical angiosperm ovule. Figure 2.7d. The ovule is a small structure attached to the placenta by means of a stalk called funicle. The body of the ovule fuses with funicle in a region called hilum. Thus, hilum represents the junction between ovule and funicle. Each ovule has one or two protective envelopes called integuments. Integuments encircle the nucellus except at the tip where a small opening called micropyle is organized. Opposite to micropylar end is the chalaza representing the basal part of the ovule. Enclosed within the integuments is a mass of cell called the nucellus. Cells of the nucellus have abundant food reserve materials. Located in the nucellus is the embryo sac or female gametophyte. An ovule generally has a single embryo sac formed from a megaspore. Megasporogenesis. The process of formation of megaspores from the megaspore mother cell is called megasporogenesis. Ovules generally differentiate a single megaspore mother cell MMC in the micropylar region of the nucellus. It is a large cell containing dense cytoplasm and a prominent nucleus. The MMC undergo meiotic division. What is the importance of MMC undergoing meiosis? Meiosis results in the production of 4 megaspores. Figure 2.8a. Female gametophyte. In a majority of flowering plant, one of the megaspore is functional while the other three degenerate. Only the functional megaspore develop into the female gametophyte embryo sac. This method of embryo sac formation from a single megaspore is termed monosporic development. What will be the ploidy of the cell of a nucellus? MMC, the functional megaspore, and the female gametophyte. Let us study formation of the embryo sac in a little more detail. Figure 2.8b. The nucleus of the functional megaspore divides mitotically to form two nuclei which moves to the opposite poles, forming the two nucleate embryo sac. Two more sequential meiotic nuclear division result in the formation of the four nucleate and later eight nucleate stages of the embryo sac. It is of interest to note that these mitotic divisions are strictly free nuclear, that is, nuclear divisions are not followed immediately by cell wall formation. After the 8 nucleate stage, cell walls are let down, leading to the organization of a typical female gametophyte or embryo sac. Observe the distribution of cells inside the embryo sac. Figure 2.8b and c. 6 of the 8 nuclei are surrounded by the cell walls and organized into cells. The remaining 2 nuclei, called polar nuclei, are situated below the egg apparatus in a large central cell. There is a characteristic distribution of the cells within the embryo sac. 3 cells are grouped together at the micropylar end and constitute the egg apparatus. The egg apparatus in turn consists of 2 synergids and 1 egg cell. The synergids have special cellular thickenings at the micropylar tip called filiform apparatus, which play an important role in guiding the pollen tubes into the synergid. 3 cells are at the chalazal end and are called the antipodals. The large central cell, as mentioned earlier, has 2 polar nuclei. Thus, a typical angiosperm embryo sac at maturity, though 8 nucleate, is 7-celled. 2.2.3 Pollination. In the preceding section, you have learned that the male and female gametes in flowering plant are produced in a pollen grain and embryo sac, respectively. As both types of gametes are non-motile, they have to be brought together for fertilization to occur. How is this achieved? Pollination is the mechanism to achieve this objective. Transfer of pollen grains shed from the anther to the stigma of the pistil is termed pollination. Flowering plants have evolved an amazing array of adaptations to achieve pollination. They make us they make use of external agents to achieve pollination. Can you list the possible external agents? Kind of pollination. Depending on the source of pollen, pollination can be divided into 3 types. Autogamy. In this type, pollination is achieved within the same flower. Transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Figure 2.9a. In a normal flower which open and expose the anther and the stigma, complete autogamy is rather rare. Autogamy in such flower requires synchrony in pollen release and stigma receptivity, and also the anthers and stigma should lie close to each other so that the self-pollination can occur. Some plants such as viola, common pansy, oxalis and commelina produce 2 types of flowers. Chasmogamous flowers, which are similar to the flower of other species with exposed anther and stigma, and clistogamous flowers which do not open at all. Figure 2.9c. In such flowers, the anther and stigma lie close to each other. When anther dehisces in the flower buds, pollen grain come in contact with the stigma to affect pollination. Thus, clistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous as there is no chance of cross pollen landing on the stigma. Clistogamous flowers produce a short seed set even in the absence of pollinators. Do you think that clistogamy is advantageous or disadvantageous to the plant? Why? Second, gleitogamy. Transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. Although gleitogamy is functionally cross-pollination involving a pollinating agent, genetically it is similar to autogamy since the pollen grains come from the same plant. Third, xenogamy. Transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of different plant. Figure 2.9b. This is the only type of pollination which during pollination brings genetically different types of pollen grain to the stigma. Agents of pollination. Plant use 2 abiotic wind and water and 1 biotic animal agent to achieve pollination. Majority of plants use biotic agent for pollination. Only a small portion of plants use abiotic agents. Pollen grains coming in contact with the stigma is a chance factor in both wind and water pollination. To compensate for these uncertainties and associated loss of pollen grains, the flower produces enormous amount of pollens when compared to the number of ovules available for pollination. Pollination by wind is more common among abiotic pollinations. Wind pollination also requires that the pollen grains are light and non-sticky so that they can be transported in wind currents. They often possess well exposed stamens so that the pollens are easily dispersed into wind currents, figure 2.10, and large, often feathery stigma to easily trap airborne pollen grains. What wind pollinated flowers often have a single ovule in each ovary and numerous flowers packed in an inflorescence. A familiar example is a corn cob. The tassels that you see are nothing but the stigma and style which wave in the wind to trap pollen grains. Wind pollination is quite common in grasses. Pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plant and is limited to about 30 genera, mostly monocotyledons. As against this, you would recall that water is a regular mode of transport for the male gametes among the lower plants, plant groups such as algae, bryophyte, and pteridophyte. It is believed, particularly for some bryophytes and pteridophytes, that their distribution is limited because of the need for water for the transport of male gametes and fertilization. Some examples of water pollinated plants are Vallisneria and Hydrilla, which grow in fresh water, and several marine sea grasses such as Zostera. Not all aquatic plants use water for pollination. In a majority of aquatic plants, such as water hyacinth and water lily, the flowers emerge above the level of water and are pollinated by insects or wind, as in most of the land plants. In Vallisneria, the female flower reach the surface of water by the long stalk and the male flowers or pollen grains are released on the surface of water. They are carried passively by water currents. Figure 2.11a. Some of them eventually reach the female flower and the stigma. In another group of water pollinated plants, such as sea grasses, female flowers remain submerged in water and the pollen grains are released inside the water. Pollen grains in many such species are long, ribbon like, and they are carried passively inside the water. Some of them reach the stigma and achieve pollination. In most of the water pollinated species, pollen grains are protected from wetting by a mucilaginous covering. Both wind and water pollinated flowers are not very colorful and do not produce nectar. What would be the reason for this?